Okay, and now we've just gone all the singles this week leaned into hip hop and R&B and dance a little bit more. Then we went into the beginning of Mexican rock, and
Yep.
now we went into some dream pop with some alt rock in it, and now we're going into full on punk, skate punk, whatever you want to
Yep.
call it. We got NoFX right here. What's your
Yep.
relationship with NoFX, Josh?
Well, they, like many of the other punk rock bands and skate punk bands that we've listened to, came across them in association with bands I saw live, like clear contemporaries of them, like Less Than Jake or um, you know, Lagwagon, or I don't know, a million other bands, Pennywise, like the whole skate punk genre. Blink 182 is clearly indebted to NoFX, I would say, um, as a more kind of famous band. And I think I saw them at Warped Tour one time. I never saw them as like a headliner, but they have this, kind of, if new wave is or not new wave, if dream pop is comforting to you, I guess this skate punk sound with a ska tinge is comforting to me, because like I really like this album. It probably, to maybe someone like Matt, I think he is probably nonplussed by this album and felt like it sounds all the same, but I really like the fast, hook driven, melodic type of punk rock music like this, with a sense of humor, when they throw horns in there, and a ska like kind of upbeat guitar part like they do on the third track Dig. That always works for me. I think they have this album has some interesting, punk is also, a hallmark of it is some social commentary, and I think that's here as well on a song like Don't Call Me White. I thought that was interesting. You could probably write a paper about that song in some ways, especially in today's modern political setting. They have songs that are kind of more like anthemic rah rah type of songs, which like The Bruise, which is almost like a Jewish anthem, which I found funny. And then they just kind of have silly songs like Jeff Wears Birkenstocks about this guy Jeff who doesn't wear regular shoes, short and fast. I don't know, this type of album works for me. This genre works for me, and I feel like it's always kind of refreshing, especially since I don't really listen to punk rock too much nowadays. So I have a nostalgic feeling towards this type of music too. It brings me back to high school and that scene. Even though I was never like a skateboarder or anything, I always kind of appreciated that scene and skateboarding itself and the music that came along with it and the culture. So so this album's thumbs up. It's not like a complicated album. I think it's pretty self-effacing, and you're going to know what you get.
Well, when you name your album Punk and Drublic, I think you don't bury the lead.
Yeah. So I guess NoFX is probably considered like one of the, like, I don't know, founding fathers or hallmarks of this specific like 90s era punk rock sound.
I think they're like
recognizable.
Yeah. I'd say they're up there amongst, maybe not the top tier forefathers in terms of timing, but they're toward the beginning of it.
But didn't also like Fat Mike, he's one of, that's his name, quote from NoFX. Didn't he also start like a record label too and stuff?
And I know they went out of their way to not become popular. They made a lot of choices, and and maybe I'll jump in, Josh, a little bit.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'm right in the middle on this album between where Matt will be, which is hating this, and where you're at, which is really loving it. There's a lot of skate punk I do like, and it's funny because NoFX doesn't connect with me as much as Goldfinger does, for example, but they're very similar. And I was trying to think to myself, like, why do I like Goldfinger? like, and I've seen them 3 or 4 times in my life, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And yet I never really wanted to go see NoFX, even though there's clear similarities between what they're trying to do, all the way down to like, going into the chorus, like that like guitar riff that like
yeah.
transitions into the chorus. And I think it's that there's like a little bit too much juvenileness in
Mm-hmm.
this for me. Like there's a line for me where like Act Like Goldfinger, they have a couple songs that are funny, like, you know, um, My Girlfriend Shower Sucks and stuff like that. But they
Yeah,
always, you're very well aware of where they are. Like Mabel is another song I think of, and we're gonna cover them later. But they also have like a very serious side. Where, vegetarianism and like the world and politics. And NoFX is trying to do the same thing here too, with like Perfect Government and Don't Call Me White, but it's just kind of like it just doesn't ring for me in the same way it does
yeah,
for like Goldfinger, because it just seems like it's like we're a punk band, so we have to sing about serious stuff from time to time, and it's like
yeah,
it's like kind of like if Blink 182. I think that's the thing with them. They just were like, we're just not going to do that. We're just going to sing the adolescent songs and
yeah, yeah.
not as much. And I think I'd still say this is a slight thumbs up for me, but there's just always something missing for me about NoFX a
Mm-hmm.
little. There's always a little bit of a sameness to certain types of skate punk. Like I love Pennywise, but they can wear you down after a while if you're
Yeah,
there. I think actually that might be one of the reasons I like Goldfinger better, is because they do vary things up a little bit more on their
right.
albums. There's different genres, and maybe I just answered my question right there as to why I like them a
Yeah,
little bit better.
not to like, I mean, I do like Goldfinger a lot too, and more than NoFX. I think Goldfinger kind of slows it down a bit too. That
Hmm.
they NoFX really follows kind of like a template in terms
Yes,
um,
that's a
of
great way to put it,
their
Josh.
music. I think also Goldfinger kind of has this like Gang of Four aspect to their sound,
Yes, that's
or like Wire or
interesting.
something. I don't know. I feel like they're a bit
Yes,
more experimental in some
I
way,
agree.
which makes them stand out to me more.
Well, that's why it's going to be fascinating. Like when I know Matt liked the Pennywise album better than he's going to like this one based on
Yeah.
what he shared. He was not a huge fan, but he liked it better. And I know he liked something like Blink 182, and he liked the Descendants, right? Which is
Mhm.
sort of like
Yep.
a group going back. I'll be interested to see what he thinks of Goldfinger. I doubt he'll love it, but I think he'll like it better than this
Yeah.
because of the fact there's a little bit more stuff. Um, but yeah, it's like you said, it's in its own way. I don't know if I'd say comforting, but it's definitely a sound that can bring a smile to my face. But there is, like, this is not an album when you're listening to it for the second or third time that it necessarily gets better. It's kind of like, okay,
No.
I picked this up, I listened to it, and now
Yeah.
when I've forgotten about it 3 years from now, I'll listen to it again and it'll bring a smile to my face. And definitely, I don't think it's at the top of the genre either. So when I get that nostalgia or that urge
Yep.
to listen to stuff, I think I'm going to go backwards because I really loved stuff like The Descendants and the Undertones that we did.
Mhm.
And I still think I'd reach for things like Pennywise or Goldfinger or a couple other groups, sort of. And groups that you mentioned, like, Less Than Jake and stuff like that. They're even different. They're much more ska to me than
Correct.
this
Yeah.
is. This
It
is
is.
this to me is more punk with a tiny bit of ska in it. Where to
Yeah.
me, something like Less Than Jake is ska with occasional a little bit of punk in it, and I definitely like, and I think the goofiness plays better with the ska tinge than the punk tinge. To me, punk, maybe that's what it is, Josh. Punk should be more serious to me with a little bit of lightheartedness, where
Mm.
ska maybe can be a little bit more lighthearted with a little bit of seriousness. And I think the balance might be a little off here.
Yeah. And make no mistake, I'm not like extremely high on this. It's not like an amazing record or anything. And I agree with you. I wouldn't. You do kind of understand and get the gist of the album if you listen to it one or two times. It's not going to be something you come back to a lot, or I would come back to a lot. But I think it does belong, in that rotation of good songs if you're making a playlist. Like standout songs on this would be like Linoleum. That's probably the biggest.
Hmm.
The first
Yeah.
song.
The Bruise was I
Yeah.
remember hearing quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and So yeah, I think the clear standouts are on here that you could listen to again and again and get the gist of them. And but
Also, we did not need scavenger type on this
no,
album.
no.
That I will say that is a clear negative on this album.
I mean, I'm wondering, is that like a bonus?
Is it a
track
bonus
almost?
track? It feels bonus
It
tracky,
does.
yeah.
Because there's a long gap too at the end of it, or in between after you hear it. So that's.
I mean, I hung in there
chalked it
and
up
listened to it for completist, but it was definitely not something I needed in my life.
Yeah, but yeah. So I also like that. I should add, I like that album, that song "Lori Myers" because they throw a female singer on there. I thought that kind of mixed it up a bit too. I guess the lead singer on that is Kimberly Shattuck, who was on the Muffs in the Muffs.
Yes. Who we're going to cover some Muff
Oh,
songs, but yeah, I've always loved her voice. If I remember correctly, I think I don't want to mix it up, but I think I remember listening to the Muffs. They're on a lot of soundtracks and stuff. It's kind of sad. If I remember correctly, I think she gets like ALS and passes away.
Oh, jeez.
But she's got such a distinguishable voice. It stands out. It actually works perfectly because they don't always do punk, the Muffs. They're kind of like an interesting sound. It's hard to explain what their sound is, but she has like a perfect punk rock voice.
Yeah. You're right. She died of ALS in 2019.
Yeah, I just remember it being sad. I remember they did like a final album and just, I don't want to bring it down a little bit, but I just remember just like, oh man, I think it was like genetic, big members of her family had it and stuff. So sad stuff. So RIP, but you're right. She elevates that song quite a bit.
Yep. So yeah, give this a listen. If you like the genre, I think you'll like this, but it's not going to like reinvent the wheel or kind of elevate the genre at all ultimately. So it's a thumbs up for me. But
Fair
I totally
enough.
get
And
your criticisms. Yeah.
yeah, I it's not a hard criticism though, because I enjoyed listening to this and it's a pleasant sound for me. And certainly we know what Matt's going to think about this. And I think we both would agree that it's not like when like he hand waves off, like the only time I ever took it to that was like he had hand waved off stuff like the specials, right? It's like, oh, it's like, no, dude, like this is like much better, much better than the rest of the genre. And like, you're just applying a bias here. I think we both know that this is like, like a little bit more frivolous and Matt's complaints are going to be, they're always valid, but I think it's particularly like, yeah, man, how can I argue that argument? Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So